a quorum, so I want to call the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is the consent agenda and the first thing on that is the minutes. I have one correction I'd like to make. It states that heat pumps are not, no, what did it say? I didn't say the right thing here. Let me look. Oh, here, where it says Barr stated that natural gas power plants that incorporate heat pumps and on and on. The heat pumps are not incorporated into the natural gas power plants. It's the composition of having a natural gas power plant and heat pumps in places where you need heat, like residences and that sort of thing. So they're geographically distinct, and I think that's not clear in the minutes. So I'd like that to be corrected. Is there any other?
I was hoping that it worked.
I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, I was hoping that there was some way to run a natural gas-fired power plant with heat pumps. That'd be pretty cool.
That would, but here we are. Any other correction or discussion of the minutes?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Move approval.
Yeah, I heard the first. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Okay, announcements. Next meeting, I originally had this wrong, but it's been corrected to January 14th. And then we have the staff updates too.
Sure. Yeah, I just give a quick update on a lot of these things because I've been working with a lot of you folks on your individual projects. So I'll save the details for when we get there. But connected with Bob a little bit about the energy retrofit program. Also with Jeff on the electric master planning. Gary and I have had a bit of connection on some of the light vehicle questions and the bike share. Also, our new zero emission vehicle incentives are in full swing. So the e-bike incentive and the electric vehicle incentive are out there. Folks are applying for those. The Rogue to Go reusable container pilot program is wrapping up. This is the last month of city involvement. I'll be writing my final report for that pretty soon. We've transferred that operation over to a new local nonprofit. So that's kind of exciting. They're growing the program and hoping to keep it going. Hoping to come up with a new city employee loan where people can buy an e-bike and basically have it taken out of their paycheck. We'll see, hopefully that will come to fruition. Still chipping away at the new climate website. So then when the City of Ashland website rolls out, the climate pages will be part of the first unfurling of that. And we're getting pretty close. At the next meeting, I'll have hopefully the first 1.0 to show you of that. Let's see. Also working with the state on a couple different levels, still wrapping up the rulemaking for the new clean fuels rules. And that was with Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Also participating with ODOT on their transportation electrification study that they're doing, which is ongoing, and doing a little bit of advocacy at the building code level to help make a stronger reach code in the next cycle, stronger building code as well. I think that's probably it for now, unless folks have questions. I don't want to take too much time here.
Stu, you had sent a note about an ODOT meeting about $4 billion, where to spend it or something like that. Did you ever go to that or?
Not sure which one you're talking about. Is that the STIP funding?
Yeah, that'd be the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program.
Okay.
Yep. So
And
that,
as I understand it, the commission rejected all of the alternatives that were under consideration and now are looking at a new set.
yeah, they extended the decision-making on that, I think until mid-September. So there's still opportunity to comment to the committee that's handling that. I can send an email out if folks are interested in that. I think, sounds like you two are already connected.
Okay.
Okay, just let me know if you need more info on any of those items.
Okay, are there any announcements from other commissioners?
I got one. SOCAN's
Realize, oh God.
SOCAN is offering their Master Climate Protector course again next February. This will be the 5th year. And I've got flyer information if anybody's interested. It's a 10-week course that meets for 3 hours on Mondays. And Stu, I had sent you an email on it too, in case you know anybody who's interested.
Sure, yeah, and then apologies to those of you that I owe emails to. I've not been able to keep up this week. So.
Yeah. No problem. Normally I'd hand out flyers, but you know, we can't do that.
Okay, Gary?
Oh, I just wanted to let everyone know that the Department of Land Conservation and Development is developing a climate-friendly and equitable communications rule, and I'll be following that. It mostly focuses on the activities within metropolitan planning organization boundaries, which we are in the Rogue Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization area. And anyway, I'll try to write a brief on that for the next meeting.
There's been some outreach from CCOC, and I will be following up with that. Stu, I think you're the only other one on this at this meeting that's actually seen that. And once I've had a chance to chat with those folks, then I'll bring something back to the commission. Jeff?
I sat in on the Oregon Department of Energy's presentation of their new big report on the state of energy in Oregon, and there wasn't really anything there that you couldn't glean from reading the summaries of the sections in that report. So if you haven't already seen that, I can send the link out, but we did that before. But there wasn't anything new and different to report from that engagement.
Did they list any goals for greenhouse gas reductions?
It was all very, very high level. It's probably buried in there. It was more education. You know, they were walking through the history of energy in electrification and so on in Oregon. It was very high level, meant for general audience.
Okay. From what I hear so far on the on Kate Brown's goals is that the state organizations have come back and basically none of their plans meet the goal so far. So there's a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
And does that mean that the governor has pushed back on that or what?
No, it's just that she asked for plans from each of the governmental organizations, right? And they put out plans, but so far those plans don't meet the goals she's trying to achieve. So
yeah, I've looked at the PUC plan and the DOE plan, and they're pretty much.
Hang on, I think we've got two people talking. Gary and then Jeff, please.
I was just going to say that from my brief review of the climate-friendly and equitable communities rulemaking, they're integrating all the laws that exist and trying to meet to my understanding, Brown's order. So there may be an exception to that, but I'll, again, know more once I dig into it. So, but I will assume that it's okay with the CPC that I act as our liaison or tracking agent, whatever you call it, to that process.
Well, I don't think we need to formally appoint you for that. If you are basically volunteering to bring back information and we all know that's what's happening, I think that's good enough. Jeff?
My comment was that the PUC and Oregon DOE are basically telling people how what they're already doing complies with the executive order. I have yet to see any major new initiatives.
Okay then. Any other announcements? Hearing none. Elizabeth, I assume there are no other commission representatives? And I think the only public forum submission I saw was from Gary, and you are able to speak without submitting such a thing. So are there any other public forum submissions? No, okay. Moving on, action items. Let's see. Where do we end up leaving those? I think that Ray, you volunteered to do it one more time this evening, but the intent is to rotate that responsibility.
Right.
And if Ray hadn't stepped forward again, I was going to assert that the chair would just appoint somebody at each meeting if nobody steps forward.
Okay.
You'd have to get a majority to rebel.
Now, are we going to go over any of the ones from November 12th? Or we're assuming everybody saw those. And I don't think we need to discuss the ones that are further on in the agenda for today's meeting.
No, my intent for this section of the agenda was just to get somebody on board,
Okay.
to write them down rather than discuss anything. When I sent out the look ahead, I had a brief paragraph that essentially said my intent was to fold the action items from that are immediately put out after each meeting that somebody like you're doing, Ray, tonight can put out quickly, and I'll fold those into the look ahead so that at that point, the action item list from the meeting, I think we don't need to look at it anymore.
Okay.
As long as everybody sees that those action items are properly folded into the look ahead.
Yeah, as long as we're adequately addressing them and keep moving on them and
Right.
track them, that's fine.
Right. I just didn't want to have two different lists.
Yep,
I
that's
just
fine.
can maintain one.
Sure.
But I can't do that fast enough. And so having somebody write them down and immediately after the meeting, sending them out is a worthwhile activity separately.
Sure.
Okay, commissioner recruitment. Stu, I have an old email from October that said you were going to talk to Kat, then Gallagher, and I may have already asked you once before about whether that's not worth keeping in front of us or what? What's the status on that?
Yeah, I think he is not available. I have an email in my inbox I haven't read from Tanya that I think has a different prospect. So we might circle back with her. It sounded like Tanya had something in mind with respect to the students, maybe not worrying about it at the moment, or maybe she had something to share when she returns. I'm not sure.
Does anybody else have anything to report about recruiting commissioners? Okay.
The one thing I might add to that, I think Tanya and I had talked briefly about what the options were to tweak the charter of the commission to make it so that students might be able to vote more easily.
Yeah, there's a whole section of the agenda tonight to
Right,
address that. So I didn't want to get into that right this minute.
Right. Well, that connects to the students in a way. So
It does.
that's all I'll say about that.
Okay, so the next thing was staff availability. Stu and Adam and I had a chat about this. And I think the theory is that in this point in the agenda, Stu, if you had anything you wanted to talk about, and I'm hoping that Adam is going to join us later on in the meeting.
Mhm.
Elizabeth?
It's actually here. I'm just having issues transferring. Adam, if you can hear me, can you log in with your other account? I think it's giving an error because we're on the same account right now. But
Yes.
Stu, go ahead in the meantime. Sorry.
Yeah, while we're waiting for Adam, the only thing I would say is that, you know, a lot of what I'm working on is going to align with, I think, the priorities of this commission. So to the extent that we can plan ahead and have check-ins about these individual projects, I'm more than happy to do that. You know, there's a few different city employees that work more than, you know, work pretty closely with the commissions. There are some commissions that are quite detached from the staff, but hopefully that won't be the case here. You know, my time is a little bit limited, so planning out pays. But as I've already met with several of you on these individual projects, I foresee that continuing going forward. And it's helpful for me to be working on the same thing as you folks and vice versa. So let's keep the prioritization in front of us and plan ahead.
Yeah, that's good, Stu. I know I view you as one of the key interfaces for us into the staff.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have all the answers and all the money. I would settle for one or the other.
Okay, Elizabeth, do you think Adam will be on any second, or should we?
Just a few more seconds. He should be. Hold on. I'm trying to talk to him on something else.
Well, again, while we're waiting, I'll just say I really appreciate all the organization that's happening in this commission right now, because that's really what it takes to get stuff done. So thank you, and let's keep doing that, please.
Hey Stu, does Brigitte, is she watching, does she watch these commission meetings or?
Normally, yes, but she had some training this week, so she's not here.
And is she working on something, I don't know, while we're waiting for Adam, is
Yeah.
she working on something narrow, or is she kind of filling kind of the range of things that you're doing? How do you see her?
No,
work program?
she's got pretty specific carve outs. She's really being the interface on the new website. So she's spending a chunk of time on that to work with the developer. She's also helping me roll out the new e-bike and EV incentives because there's a bit of legwork up front with that, which we're mostly done with at this point. And then this is news to you, Bob, but I invited her to help us work on the energy retrofit project. So we'll have her, she's got some background in the Philadelphia sort of similar on-bill financing programs. So I look forward to doing that, and hopefully we'll get that going soon.
Great, terrific. Yeah, well, I saw you sent me a meeting invitation. We'll schedule something next week.
Yep, great.
So one other curiosity for me is I've heard reference to an Ashland solar co-op, and I'm wondering, Stu, whether you can say more about what's going on with that.
Yeah, I don't have my finger on the pulse of what they're working on right now, actually. Pretty much all of what they are doing is enabled by our virtual net metering policy that we created as a result of the climate plan. So that's a nice real benefit that we're seeing. Oh, here's Adam. But yeah, I don't know exactly what they're planning at this moment in time.
Well, it sounds like Bob might have some idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've just joined the board of it, so I know fairly with
One hopes you know.
some considerable depth, because we're having meetings every other week, and we've created a couple of committees to explore specific aspects of it, on power generation, one on power generation, one on membership, because it's a co-op. So there's going to have to be a whole policy and approach to membership, and then the finance, budget and finance. So I'm happy to give a little bit more about that, but I don't want to take from the committee's time, the commission's time.
Okay. So
But
at some
yes,
future
it's
time, that would be interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of it's what used to be Ashland Community Solar, which was set up about a year or two ago, and some of the people that were involved in that are still involved in this, and then there are a couple of other people that are now involved in this as well. But really trying to build it out as an organization. We're assessing feasibility at this point. There's lots and lots of questions, including this with the city, of course.
Gary, do you have a quick wrap up on this?
I was just wondering if maybe Bob could give us a briefing at a future meeting.
Yes.
Much like we did with the electric and natural gas.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's probably much less than that.
Well, anyway, I will negotiate with Bob about how much time makes sense and figure out where to put it in an agenda.
But yes, I'd be happy to.
So now that we've got Adam with us, we're at the staff availability point in the agenda, Adam. So whatever you had to say on that would be appreciated.
Okay, I was in and out. This is high security. I had to try 3 accounts, passcodes, all this kind of, you guys are locked in. So I heard a little bit of the conversation as I was going in and out a couple times trying to get on. So I don't know if there's any particular questions or context we want. I think I heard a little bit of a recap that the three of us, Stu and Rick and I, met earlier this week to kind of talk about this a little bit. But Rick, did you have anything particular you wanted me to give in terms of the overview of that, or what?
No, I think just the general approach about how staff needs to be involved in implementing policy and what the process is between council staff and the commission. A short summary of that I think would be useful. And then as we get further through the agenda, I think the examples will present themselves.
Okay. What I think we talked about is, what stuff are new initiatives not already in a work product or work plan that Stu is got going. And, we talked about several positions in the city have a similar scenario in which the job duties and the job description of the staff person aligns very, very closely with that of a particular commission. And we have that in our Firewise work in the fire department. And we have our housing specialist position, who most of Linda's work really, highly overlaps with the commission. And then we have Stu similarly. So it's an interesting kind of a different model than like historic commission, who has a staff liaison, but they're there to do the production work of the commission packets, be there for technical answers, but there isn't a like ongoing programming work very much. That any historic ongoing programming is the whole department. So there is a little bit different idea in concept for a commission that has a staff position highly connected and related to the mission of the commission. The challenge is, as we put things together, they have ongoing workload. So every new item that happens creates, ongoing work of Stu's time. Where I think the best alignment sits, and again, if I'm straying and not remembering some of the key pieces of the conversation, either of you feel free to chime in, is, how does the commission help support the work that's already on the plate or already in progress, and looking at what a commission might think are low-hanging fruit and easy to put through. How do we get the staff input in there that says, well, that might look like low hanging, but here are the reasons why it's not as low hanging as maybe this list of other things that we've already kind of looked at and vetted and have maybe in some shape or form underway. So, I don't have any magic for that, but, a balance on that is what I think we're shooting for. And again, the constraints are Stu's got, it's 40 hours a week, and we can only do so much so fast. We are, as projects get going, Stu is not the only staff resource for this commission, obviously. I try and I want to stay connected as I can to this commission, given the other stuff that I've got floating around right now. But we also have, regular conversations. Stu and I met with Bill Molnar yesterday. I talked with Scott. I have regular department head meetings. Kind of the benefit of being in my slot now is I have, a different role with the department heads, and we can get, have conversations with those right out in front, not just conceptually, but where they are in the work plan, how and why they're slotted where they are. So I think that hopefully is helpful for whatever time period I'm in that slot. But we do have this integrated in other departments, but Stu is your primary conduit. So, I don't know if there's any kind of questions of bottlenecks or frustrations that maybe we could chat about, or Rick or Stu, if there were pieces from our conversation that I'm not grabbing onto for the good of the order.
Well, Stu, unless you have anything, I think we would be best off using what time you have, Adam, actually segueing into the next item on the agenda. And then later on, there's the council communication section that I'm also hoping you're going to chime in on.
I've got till 5:30. I don't know when the timeline is. I'm sorry, I got something else I've got to get to.
Fine, we will. The chair is going to reorganize the agenda just a wee bit and move 5.8 up ahead of 5.5. So what I'd like to do is to go through the comprehensive master capital planning section, because that is apparently you've talked to Bill Molnar, and then immediately after that go into the council communication, and then we'll pick up with the order of the agenda after that.
Thanks.
So Ray,
Yeah.
You want to start?
Yeah,
that?
there's 4 things to talk to on the Ashland master plans and documents. The first one was I had an action item to look at adding capital improvement program. Should that be in here? I did look at it, and I think it should be in here. I think from the CPC involvement and looking at the document, there's a couple pages that is the header to it. And then there's a whole list of projects, and this goes out to 2039. So I think one of the changes I saw that I think we should make is in those first couple header doc pages, there's city council goals and department goals. And when Paula Brown originally presented this to council, which approved this in last April in 2019, she had a line calling address climate change, but that's not in the document that we're ended up with. So I think we should put a couple lines in there. That's part of our goals with these projects, is also addressing climate change and doing actions to reduce the impacts or adaptation to climate change. So I think, Adam, I would probably need to give that input to Scott. Is that correct? Because I think this is also, this was supposedly on a look ahead to be accepted by council in March.
The overall CIP, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're building that right now. And what the idea is, like you say, it's a 20-year document. We really look at 6 years. Every time we update, we take 6-year chunk as the focus look, but then we will adjust others as we might know for the further out stuff. And then out of that comes, we do it in February, March. So then when we come into budget, the first 2 years of that 6-year update drop into the proposed budget. that starts, publicly starts with the budget committee in April and May,
Right.
with it finishing up with the council in June. So yeah, if there are things that you want, suggestions for putting into the CIP itself, definitely you can send them to Stu and I, and we can get them to Scott, or copy Scott's fine.
Okay.
I guess I'd make a quick comment at department goals. Paula did do that. I don't think we have any other departments that have kind of that kind of, department goal stuff. That's not those aren't approved by council. Those are kind of working, working parameters. For what it's worth, I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but those aren't official. I'm not sure if Scott is going to go through any processes to, update department goals or anything like that. Really what we work on, primarily is, department goals are whatever council goals are. We have operational requirements and all those things, but if we're pulling on those, that
Well, I think you guys can decide where it should go in the document, but I think we should make some mention that when we engage in these projects, we want to be aware of climate change. And
yeah, we're going to do a similar, our economic development strategy has some specific, similar filter or lens to look at CIPs for their economic development potential for that too. So I think climate and economic development are both should be listed in there as kind of filters and points of emphasis.
Okay, and again, I don't think we want to get into the weeds of each of the projects and look at them and decide what to do there. This is really just an overall statement from a planning document.
It may, we'll probably elaborate on that. That statement is probably from the staff side. We can elaborate on it in the CIP, because what Scott is looking at is he is doing life cycle costing and looking at, carbon calculations. And that's something that Stu has been working with him on to get more of a standardized. Some projects, it's a nicer fit than others, but that is part of that.
That's an example of an action we want to take and when the city does their projects.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll send out a note on that one. Underneath the electric, we had a meeting 12/4 with Tom, the head of the electric, and Rick and Stu and Jeff and myself. And Stu and Jeff had some action items coming out of that to redo the RFP. And then there's the Daniel Meyer pool. I think if we have time, we'll discuss more of that later, but there was a meeting held where just a rollout to the public of what the pool plans were. And there was a lot of discussion on how to heat it. There were a lot of BTUs in there to keep that pool hot year round. And, but I do know in talking with Tara that the Parks Commission plans a separate meeting with CPC to go over the pool design. So, and they're going to post that design and make it available to the public. So that could be something for us to look at before that meeting. The last one is the comp plan. So I think we had an action item to know what the city's plan is for when to update, either all of it or portions of it. And then there's also an additional discussion because some of us feel that we need to incorporate the Seep into the comp plan somehow, in some way. And that's just more of a broader thing. Where should the Seep reside? And I know from a land development planning perspective, I know Gary would like to see it in the Seep. I'm sorry, in the comprehensive plan. So I guess I'd like to understand staff's position on that. And if there's still some further discussion needed, some work to understand the pros and cons of putting it in.
Yeah, before we open it up for that, I got an email from Tanya, and let me just read it into the record here. It says, I reached out to Bill Molnar to find out about the schedule for updating the comp plan, and we discussed the difference in understanding among commissioners regarding the importance of codifying Seep strategies in the comp plan. Bill offered to watch the part of the meeting that included the discussion about the comp plan and either reach out to correct any commissioners who misunderstand the role of the comp plan. He also offered to come talk to the commission if it would be helpful. it might be a good idea just so we can all get a clear understanding of how important this is to the overall work. And with that, it sounds like Stu and Adam, you've talked to him even more recently than that email. So please enlighten us.
Sure. I don't know, Stu, if you want to grab on. We had a good meeting just talking about it in general, and I can answer some of those questions that Tanya was asking of Bill. There is no necessarily any required cadence to element updates. The element updates have happened for a variety of reasons over the years: regulatory change, funding availability, grants. Grants can help, make those happen if we get external consultants to do that. Or if certain things need to be changed in an element to facilitate, grant approvals or anything like that. So there's a lot of different ways, or council just saying, this is the focus in their goal setting or something. So they've happened in different times, different cadence. So there isn't a prescribed schedule sitting out there looking forward. But what we ended up talking about was, really what's the objective, of the commission in doing that, and how best that would be done, and what kind of effort does that take for what you get out of that. In looking at the Seep, you could probably, not all of the Seep is comp planable, I guess, in that, the comp plan is, you could take all the policy work, and some of the higher level actions, but some of them would probably fall below the threshold of residing in the comp plan. And then the other piece is, probably those elements that do kind of make that threshold are probably would sit in 3, 4, 5 different chapters. So it would be, that's a significant undertaking to update, because other groups would then glom on and say, well, we want to update other components. You wouldn't just be inserting your pieces. It would be, a full rewrite of an element. So that's a huge, that is a huge undertaking. And then the question is, what is the outcome, or what is the desired outcome of that exercise? So that's a question maybe to pose for the group, but I could then finish with, and then Stu could probably summarize real well. We talked about the most, probably the biggest bang for the buck, from a comp plan perspective, is it's energy, air, and water is the chapter. And really, we had an idea to run by the group, is gluing two things together. The comprehensive electric utility strategy is going to have a whole bunch of content that relates to energy policy. It doesn't hit everything, but what we could do is, with that scope of work, whether or not it's done internally or part of the consultant piece, we can add a task and a deliverable to have a draft to take the everything that is generated out of that electric utility strategy, and put that into a kind of comp plan worded document. So it would be a starter kit, at least for that chunk, that could then feed in and update the energy element of the comp plan, because that's probably where the biggest majority of the Seep content fits. Other pieces fit in other elements. Obviously, there's some transportation pieces. We did get a Seep reference into the housing element that was recently adopted, but the energy one is the key piece, and the timing may be advantageous for water. Water is doing their state water conservation reporting update, so that's in that same element. So there's ideas there, but what at least we could do is ensure that everything that was done as part of the electric utility strategy is also put together in a format, in a phrasing, in a methodology and template that would be that would step right into that element update. I hit it all right, Stu? Any pieces I missed?
I think that's the gist of it. I could say more, but I'm curious to see what questions people have first.
Well, thanks, Adam. Um, I kind of like the idea of the Seep together. It could still exist together someplace, and then it's a question of how much you want to disseminate it into other documents, such as that element you talked about, element 11 in the comp plan. I'm worried about, because one of the options was we keep the Seep as a standalone and everything references it. Kind of really don't like that. The other thing is you break the Seep up and separate it into everything so that it's still there, but it'd be hard to find as a standalone, you know, if you wanted to just look at what the Seep is doing and for doing updates. I kind of like keeping it together, but yet integrating it, at least the key part of it, into the comp plan. Or maybe the parts that apply, as you say, that are comp planable. So I don't think, at least personally, that we need to break it all up and find a home in each element for the comp plan.
Or at least not immediately. I mean,
Yeah.
as the elements do come up, presumably we would want them to include whatever is appropriate.
Yeah, that's the part I forgot that we did talk about, that's, you know, as they do arise, we want to make sure that, you know, all commissions are plugged in, you know, as relevant, you know, to suggest inclusions or updates to any of the elements as they come.
Gary?
One of the problems that we kind of face, I guess, is that some of those comp plan elements don't get updated. Natural hazards, for instance, I wouldn't think has been updated. As an example, fortunately, the transportation element does get updated as a part of the transportation system plan. So that one will be able to capture pretty well, or at least to have the opportunity to integrate Seep into that. But it's the elements that don't get updated that will go by the wayside. And natural hazards, given the adaptation part of our work, is really, I think, a critical element in terms of being updated.
So, you know, the conversation, that's, you know, a good point. You're right. There's some that are very dated, you know, and some that are very dated, but still very relevant. You know, that's another thing, you know, because they are high level policy, you know, you could update components, but some of the theory is still fairly sound. You know, that really wasn't part of our conversation of, you know, of what needs to be updated just on its own, you know, just in reviewing that it'd be a huge planning department work plan, you know, item. Those are, you know, typically, you know, they're 6 to 12 month processes per element, you know, often. So, you know, there is also some conversation to be had probably with you all about if you had X number of hours of planning department staff resources, would you want it to be in comp plan work, or would you want it to be in code development work? You know, that's maybe I mean, that's a hypothetical, but to get the point across of, you know, solar reserve on roofs and implementing items, there's a number of things that I think it'd be important for the commission to kind of maybe prioritize at some point to say which kind of things you know, are most beneficial and a best bang for the buck for, honestly, what's going to be for quite a while, you know, limited planning staff resources for new code development of any kind, climate or otherwise. That's a tight resource, and it's not getting any better. So that's a conversation that might be worth having, and that might feed kind of the strategy for how Seep and the comp plan relate in the future.
Gary?
I was just going to kind of follow up on that, and that, at least in my experience, many of the comp plan elements as a part of their development, at least through the consultant process, usually includes the development of specific code amendments to implement them. So oftentimes that's a package of things that happen as a part of the contract.
It can be, right? Well, I've seen that both ways for us. Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, Adam, when you were talking about putting SEEP elements or issues that, SEEP goals and strategies in the energy, air, and water and water conservation, I didn't hear, I don't think, any sense of when that element is slated for updating, because I know that they do. You said that the comp plan the elements get updated little by little. So do we know when that one is actually slated for update? Is that in 2021? Is that 2023? Or what's the sense of that?
I'll jump in there. So I think one of the things we got from our conversation with community development was that they're willing to shepherd us through the process of updating the energy chapter or the energy element. And we can do that in parallel with the electric master plan development. So, sort of like Gary said, of writing the comp plan and then the implementation code, we'd be doing the reverse, essentially, putting together the electric master plan document and hopefully crafting a draft energy element alongside that, so they would be compatible. And once we have a electric master plan that we agree on and is adoptable, we can also move ahead with the energy element at the same time. So I guess it may be on the optimistic side, but my draft mental timeline was we work on the master plan for the electricity utility in 2021 and then try to get the energy element updated in 2022, maybe 2021, but probably not. We have, that was something that Bill agreed was feasible, that they could help us with that project. And I'm inclined to accept that offer, even though it's, maybe not a comprehensive integration. When I think about the climate plan, there's two main pieces of it. One is GHG and energy questions, and the other is resilience. Some of the resilience is spoken to already with some of the wildfire amendments that are in the comp plan. So we don't need to try to do everything. And I think Bill made a good point too, that if we create a new chapter that is just the SEEP, that doesn't guarantee compliance from any of the other elements. And that in fact, there's some inherent conflict in some of the elements, and that's normal. So I guess I am sort of predisposed to work within the existing structure so that we don't have to convince anybody it's a good idea to add something new. And also, I think the idea of doing a complete rewrite of the comp plan like some cities do is just probably a non-starter for the city of Ashland, given our resources. So looking at it from a purely practical perspective, we have a SEEP update that we're supposed to try to do in the next year. This could be a big piece of that. There may be some residual SEEP implementation plan that is also there, but I think it's a good opportunity to sort of make headway. And this is also a great time to update that energy element because we're at a midpoint between the old BPA contract and the future BPA contract. And that chapter, if you folks haven't read it, speaks to many of the important issues that this commission is going to deal with. So I think it'd be worth looking at. I'd be curious to know what you folks think. And, it's nice to hear that we have an offer sort of from ComDev to work on that aspect of it.
I would add that it's a conditional offer in that non-ComDev staff are going to do the heavy lifting. The part that which is normal for many of the elements. This element, I think, we were talking with Bill, Dick Wanderscheid wrote the majority of it, who was filled a lot of roles with the city. Last role he filled was our electric director, but he started as a planner. Interesting evolution, conservation, energy efficiency, solar. But ComDev really shepherds the process and the noticing and the compliance with DLCD It has to go through the planning commission regardless. Study session, formal recommendation onto the council. So there's quite a bit of stuff that they do, even without them being the primary authors, or probably even being much more than a helpful internal proofreader, and give some guidance. So it does mean the heavy lifting, is outside of ComDev, which is why we thought, okay, at least a good chunk of that would be similar, if not identical, to some of the contents of the comprehensive electric utility strategy, not 100%, and that we could task that and give ourselves a running head start on that content through that process, and then fill in the pieces around it. And as Stu mentioned, we talked about, I think it's really important actually to get that comprehensive electric utility strategy stuff in that element prior to council's discussion about what to do with the BPA contract, because that discussion at council is going to be in 2024, 25, not in 28. So really the window is probably pretty good. We're giving ourselves a little bit of buffer, but not a lot actually. And so I think that'd be pretty smart. There's also stuff in there that I know we've talked about in the past when I've been at meetings on the natural gas side, and that clearly those kind of things are in there as well. So that wouldn't be part of the electric utility strategy content very much. Some of that stuff would have to feed in from a different way, but it could, that would be another commission medium to heavy lift to get policy work on that side of it moved in there too. And then I think our public works and conservation, water conservation staff would be a big role in that, in the water part of updating. And then air, we'd probably rely on some of our county partners to help on some of that air quality piece. And Chris Chambers from fire would be a good resource. So it's a compilation team effort to put that element together, but a good chunk of it sits with CPC with both the electricity and the natural gas issues that we're working on.
So let me see if I understand. What I'm hearing is that for the source part of the problem, that there is a path forward that involves appropriate staff members and CPC and energy and all that. So that part I think I get, and I'm hoping there's consensus from the commission, but we need to check that's fine. What I'm not hearing is the elements of the comp plan that pertain to the built environment. And it may be that would be just too much of a stretch for both the commission and for staff to be trying to do that. And I freely admit, I don't even really understand which elements affect that portion of the problem. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it is. I hadn't thought about that part because, there are, I think, it's in there.
There is a housing element.
Yeah, there's a variety of things, and we could break that down as we go and see what stuff is going to naturally be, a part of the electric utility strategy, and what are left out and would need to have a related but parallel process to make sure they're incorporated.
Yeah, and I don't want us to deep end because we're actually starting to run out of time on this agenda item anyway. I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't totally out in the weeds on this. And Jeff, I think you had something you want to say?
I think he's still thinking. You're on mute, Jeff.
Nope, still can't hear you, Jeff.
Sorry about that. When I hit the lower left corner, bad things happen on my Mac. No, we got feedback from Stu on including input to the comp plan in this scoping document that we're working on for the electric utility. So we'll be talking about that next week in more detail.
Yeah, Ray?
So I think as I hear it then, we would keep the Seep together and we would integrate the necessary parts, look at integrating into element 11 with a focus on energy. And we have a timeline of doing that sometime in 2022 or so, because we've got a Seep update before then and we've got to develop the electric plan before then.
Yeah, as far as big planning documents go, we've got an opportunity perhaps to do the electric master plan before the transportation systems plan starts to really rev up again. So that's going to be another big piece of work. And somewhere alongside of both of those, we're going to do the Seep update. So
Right.
Sounds like a very significant amount of work to me. And I'd, at a later date, would love to catch up. I'm going to actually meet with Rick next week to talk about the Seep update and different options that may exist for that.
So we can use this as an example and see how it goes relative to updating other elements after that.
Yeah, and so given the alignment between staff and the commission work, this seems like a good way to go forward, and to do more than that, maybe more than either could actually do anyway. Gary, it seemed like you had something to say.
Oh, I was just saying that I think we should, while I concur that updating the energy element using the energy or the electric master plan as a vehicle to achieve that makes a lot of sense, but I would like to continue to explore how we get to the other comprehensive plan issues that more directly relate to the built environment. I don't have a specific strategy on how we might be able to do that, but I would not like to exclude that as a possibility, only because, again, there's some vital issues that aren't related in any way to energy that I believe we need to address as soon as practical.
Yeah, so that's my assumption as well. And I think the way we might want to leave that, Gary, is to put the burden on you. Are you okay with that, to come back to me with thoughts about how to move that forward at some point?
Absolutely. Okay. I'm all in.
Good.
So do we have any action item for this then? Do we need to start getting support from Bill that that's what we want to do, or is there more discussion to decide?
Well, I think what would be worthwhile is, Ray, because you kind of had the lead on this, if you could summarize the discussion we just had and put it into written form so that we can all look at it and then nod our heads at some future meeting. That's really what we're doing.
Okay, I'll send it to Stu.
And we'll do that in parallel with actually doing the work.
Okay.
Just to cap it, just from the staff end, this is, this conversation and kind of this concept, we're good to go from, as it stands now, unless we have another, chaotic global emergency. We have both Tom McBartlett and Bill Molnar, lined up. We're Tom's in on the electric utility strategy side, and I added with him, I updated him on this comp plan concept. So we're between, community development director, electric utility director, temporary city manager, and your key person, Stu. We're lined up. I think this is a good movement. So I'm appreciative that the commission feels the same way.
Great. Gary?
I just have one more thing. So Ray, I think this discussion should also be integrated into the electric master plan so that we capture that step in terms of how those two processes play out together.
Yeah, I think Jeff already mentioned that we're including some of the comp plan into the electrical.
Yeah, so Jeff and Ray and myself and staff are all working together on all these things. So I think you'll, let us go and do something, Gary. And then if you're not seeing what you like, then it's time to comment.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Okay, great. So now I want to move to 5.8, the council communication. At our last meeting, it seemed like there were some proposals for how to change how we're communicating with council. And I put together an outline of a document that this commission could send to council. I did not draft language because I didn't feel like there was consensus at the prior meeting. And so the place I'd like to get to tonight is what changes there would be to the outline and identifying who would then translate an outline into something that could actually be sent to council. And I particularly would like Adam to comment. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the outline in detail, but as we go through it, giving your feedback on how staff can help on this, and from observing how the city works, council and staff over years, what would be an effective way to go forward with this.
Okay.
So does that make sense to everybody? Is everybody on board with that approach to this? You know,
Keep talking, Rick.
I'm not seeing any heads wag the wrong way, so silence implies consent. So at the previous meeting, we had discussed turning this into a document that we're going to send to them, as opposed to expecting to get time in front of council. And so it's in the form of a memo to council. It breaks it down into 4 areas. One is just background, because there's new counselors coming on board who presumably are not familiar with everything that's happened. So there's the background section. There's present work, where we're just informing council, this is what we are doing, and absent them directing us to do something different, we're going to keep doing it. And then a section on policy recommendations, where CPC is saying to council, these are policy items that we would like for you to engage on. And then finally, there's budget recommendations. And at the end of the document, I have a section called general commentary. It's just a place to put in things. It turned out it was only one email from Stu that has something to do with the topic at hand. Okay, so there's the concept of having a document that goes to council rather than looking to have time in front of council first. Is the commission on board with that? And if so, is the broad outlines that I just put forward also what commission wants to do? Jeff?
I like your approach. First, give them a memo, and then the city council can follow up or kind of set the stage for future updates. That seems like a reasonable approach to me.
Right. Well, I don't think I'll back off from trying to get time directly in front of council where we can engage in discussion. But I think the general approach you're suggesting is consistent with what I was suggesting. Bob?
Yeah, no, I'll also say I agree with the approach. I think a memo is the right first step. Perhaps followed up with more specific FaceTime on specific issues. And I'd like the 4 areas that you laid out. I think in the background, I don't know if your methodology in this meeting, do you want to go section by section? Because I think in the background, it's important to set the stage for those city council members who weren't here, who weren't on the city council, they probably were here. Why should they care? Why is it important to Ashland? Because you hear a lot of people saying that we're not going to make much of a dent on climate, on greenhouse gas emissions in a town of 21,000 people. Why do we have to do it? And I think we have to have a very short but clear section of why we have to do our part, and why on mitigation, and also why it's so important to do it on adaptation, on resilience. That's in the background section. I have comments on some of the other sections as well, but I just, in the interest of moving the conversation along to in the way that you wanted, Rick.
Yeah, well, I would like to do it section by section. There's 4 sections, so I don't think that's an overwhelming number. And so if anybody else has comments on the background outline, now would be a good time. Okay, I
Well,
hope it would be.
How long do you think this background would be? Less than a page? Or?
I would hope that this whole thing is not more than 4 pages, certainly. And so I would guess that the background can't be more than a page.
Would we include a link for background to our climate page and the Seep or whatever as a
Sure,
reference?
I think references are always in order because they're really short and people can choose to follow them or not.
Okay. Again, some of this is mostly given we got new council members and new mayor and whatever.
Okay, Gary, and then Adam.
I just was curious what the timeline for the draft of this document is, and whether we'll have an opportunity as a commission to review it before it goes to the commission, before it goes to the council.
My proposal is that we solidify this outline tonight and bring something back that is a first draft of an actual document in January. I'd like to have it approved by the commission no later than February. And then the question is to staff, is that too late to affect the budget process and the onboarding of council members? How quickly do we need to do this? And so Adam, you were up next anyway.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention on council onboarding, just with a pretty historically unprecedented, at least in my 30 years here, of three people coming on, four things changing, but one is a current councilor going to mayor. So a whole new dynamic from a council onboarding standpoint. Elizabeth's helping a ton on this. We are giving them the fire hose of materials. They have public records, ethics, all of our internal forms and administrative policies, all the links to all the master plans. This for sure I've ensured is included. The Seep generally is one of the list of onboarding library of document links for them. So I just want to let you know that in general, they're receiving all of this, which leads to this, Rick, your question. I think actually February is probably just right, because there's going to have so much stuff that this memo can serve as a reminder that, oh yeah, you probably did see the Seep document and all that stuff that the city hall sent you, and here's some focused things. So that may be just useful in how you frame what you put together and how the memo will arrive to them. Some will have done 100% of their homework, and more, and ask us for more stuff. And some probably will be struggling to get through stuff and may or may not have dug into the Seep. So just background context for you on especially the new people, how they're getting information and just having it.
Yeah. So would you guess, having observed this process, that sometime mid-February is somewhat optimal? It's after the great weight of introductory material has come and gone, and so this thing won't get lost in that pile.
Yeah, I think it's
later.
Yeah, I think it's a really good timing. And the other question was, are you wanting it as a kind of, in a council packet, or are you wanting it as a separately sent FYI document? How is the deliverable? You know, what's the,
You tell me what would be effective, but what I want is for the counselors to actually look at it and think about it and discuss it amongst themselves at some point.
ooh, that's a tall order. I don't know how I can make sure, no. I need to look. I mean, there are so many topics queued up waiting for the new group. I mean, the current group has kind of deferred a few things. And we just are going to be hot and heavy. So there isn't going to be, and 2 study sessions, both January and February, because of holidays, we're missing one of the 2 study sessions in each month. So things are going to be packed. So having it be able to be openly discussed. One thing that hopefully is happening in June, this is a preview, FYI, hasn't been discussed all the way by council yet, is, you know, trying to do some sort of nominal, you know, effort at goal setting, prioritization, something like that. And I think this would be useful piece of information for that process, undefined process so far. But something like that will be in place before we get into budget. So I have to ponder that about, I mean, there's time. I can get back
Okay,
to
so
you.
what I'm hearing is that the schedule I laid out is consistent with what you know right now, and we should just roll on with it and adapt as we learn more.
Yeah, and I think the memo format, I agree, is a great format because it can be utilized a number of different ways. So I think that's a good way to roll.
Okay, great. So if there wasn't any other commentary about the background, then I'd like to move on to present work. There was 2 questions in the outline that I put forward. One is whether we need to make a budget request for the what I call the energy utility strategic plan. Currently, that's the electric utility strategic plan. From the discussions that have been had since I put together this document, it seems like perhaps that's not necessary, that the electric utility already has the budget in place to do that. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. And then at the bottom of the present work section, I said topic list question mark. Topic list was referring to the CPC look ahead document. And my current belief is that dropping that on them is probably not a good idea because there's so much context you have to have in order to understand what each of those items are that it would just be can't understand it or overwhelming. Bob?
So I think I think the framework that you and Tanya laid out in August as we started again is a nice way to frame it for council members who aren't deeply in the weeds on this, with there's, you know, a big effort on planning and a big effort on electrifying Ashland. So really just, you know, a few paragraphs on those 2 things and how that kind of rolls out with, you know, obviously the prize is going to be the electricity master plan. And then if we want to do any more detail, that could go into an annex if there's anything, or a link to something else, rather than provide all that detail. I think it's just too many things for them to get their to take on board and understand how it all fits in. But just keeping it simple, keeping the message simple. We're focusing on, you know, inserting the climate and energy action plan into all the plans and everything we can possibly do to electrify Ashland and all of its, both the city and the community.
Great.
I do think we have a third item there is the Seep update.
Yeah. I'm not sure how far along we're going to be with that. So I suspect it would make more sense to it's just going to be an informational item. It'll be a very short paragraph that says, we were going to do this. You know what happened in 2020, and so it didn't get done. We're working on it.
I think it's something we're committed to do next year, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So, but I think it's a real short paragraph. I don't think we need to belabor it.
No.
I think it'd be fine to lump that in with the other planning efforts also.
Okay. Jeff?
Would you like some of us to draft some verbiage and throw over the wall to you?
Yes, I'd like to have that discussion when we get down through the rest of the outline.
Okay.
So is there any other commentary on the present work portion? Okay. Now, policy recommendations. Stu has commented several times, and I agree with him that it is best to take fairly fleshed out policy items to council one at a time with good staff background supporting them. And so I don't know if any of these meet that bar. That's a relatively high bar. And so I'm assuming that you have all had a chance to look through this. I don't want to go through it line by line, but the top level items in the outline, I do want to go through those, and hopefully we can form a consensus about whether that item belongs in this memo or not. So the first one is staff training. There's a fair amount of background and talking about it. And Gary, you popped your hand out first.
Well, that's actually coincidental, but as it turns out, I reviewed the link that Tanya provided to Seattle's carbon note. And if you didn't have the chance to take a look at that, I think that would be a policy that could well be fleshed out, and in fact would dramatically change the entire city, whether it's the council's review of an action item or a policy issue, or a staff project that comes from the utilities department, for instance. Each of those, according to the way that I understand Seattle's carbon note, would have a brief description of the implications that that policy or action might have on climate. The value that that brings is not only elevating climate before the council on all the decisions that they may face during the coming year and years after, but also it forces each and every department that has business before the council to contemplate, analyze, and to evaluate the impacts of that action on carbon. And that's really what the Seep envisioned when it set out policy to embed carbon issues in city government. So I think this is one that somehow, if the council were to agree to it, would immediately solve many of the other staffing issues that we have, and that every staff person would be obligated in presenting and developing a action item to research and document the implications on climate.
Okay, what I had intended to do was to march down through them in order, so it's easy for me. And staff training was the first one, and that was what I was referring to. And you've shifted to the carbon notes, Gary, which okay. And now that we're into that one, let's finish it. And Adam, I think you were going to comment, and I'm not sure which one you were going to comment on.
The just training, the staff training, so you can finish
Okay,
this.
so we'll come back to that in a minute. Bob?
So I mean, I agree with Gary and with Tanya's note that that's a really important addition to the way the council analyzes the issues that come before it for decision. I was under the impression that that was already in process, that the staff had already kind of worked out doing something, maybe it wasn't called a carbon note, but an item, a specific analysis that, you know, equivalent to the financial analysis for every single policy or program that comes before the city council. So I could be wrong about that. Being one of the
might be able to tell us something about it.
So let me ask then, if that's the case, or even if it's not the case, is this something that the council needs to decide and ask for, or is this just, can this be something that the city manager, in the role as city manager and the way the manager sets up the decisions for the council, can just do?
Yeah, no, I was thinking some of those same things as you, that you just brought up as this was being read. I hadn't had a chance to pop the link, so I just did, and I do recall hearing about it now. Couple things. We referenced, and I think very soon after it was adopted, departments started doing a much better job of in the council goals, policies, plans section of the council communication, which is the staff report, of including the, if applicable, action item, what Seep action item the item in front of council furthers or connects with. And I think that has grown to be nearly standard. And we've had talks at department head level to ensure that we're not using it too much towards tangential kind of connections. We want them, if they don't have a solid connection, we're not trying to overdo it and put it in anyway. So I think that part, and that was in the Seep, that was actually an action item in the Seep originally, was to ensure that kind of connection was made. This is a next level thing, I would say. This is a little more than that, and it's more than what has been happening now. And I think it's mostly a city manager thing, but it depends on what level of detail of analysis we're talking about. Then it's a staffing resource thing. That's a lot. In different projects, it could be, fairly straightforward procurement of a particular vehicle, or but those don't go to council usually. So when we're talking about things that go to council, the water treatment plant, that makes sense. We have that. We are doing that on a large stuff. So having a resolution maybe doesn't hurt to ensure that, but it probably isn't necessary. Where I think it runs into the rub is that middle stuff, stuff that goes to council but isn't large consultant contracts type stuff, where it's actual current city staff load to do analysis. Because you referenced the financial part. I have that in my notes. I'd much rather, we are in a deficit in doing analysis often on the financial side. In my book, we talk about somewhat how it hits the budget. Well, that's different than fiscal impact. I mean, that's related. It's a part, but it's not all of it. So I would say we're a little deficient in that section to take on fixing that and doing this the way it's, I think, envisioned and intended by this group. That's a heavy one that I'd want to talk about more and figure out really where that is, because the people that write the council communications are almost always department heads, and probably the majority of them are 6 of us. So it's, yes, they assign some staff to do some of the analysis, but to summarize it and include it in every council item that has a relationship to carbon is a lot. Not to say it's not good, it's just a lot.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that some of this is already happening, and it may not be the best use of limited council attention to try to get something to happen that's already happening.
Yeah, I'd like to work with you all to creep the needle up, turn the dial on it, maybe a little bit over time, and looking at examples, because I do, I want to change the council communication template. It's overall. There's some other things unrelated to this that I think it needs. We can make this easily, I think, to answer your question, Bob, on city manager stuff. I can make this a point of emphasis operationally without having council ask me to. I think we're there of being ready to turn the dial. To get to this, I'd love your input to see where we're over time, grade us and course correct us as we go.
Gary?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think this, if the council were to endorse this approach, we would ostensibly deal not only with staff training, but also the hiring issues, because at that juncture, then there would be a certain level of competence of the new city manager, assuming the council moves forward with hiring one, or the new public works director. All those people would know that a part of the job is making sure that they can analyze, understand, and articulate carbon issues as a part of the issues that they present to the council. Similarly, they would expect their staff to also be able to address those same issues in preparing action items before the council. So in some ways, this action item, if approved, would have the effect of immersing the entire staff from top to bottom in understanding and advancing climate issues. And that's in large part why I'm supportive of taking this approach, is because it does have that diffusive effect on the entire city.
Stu?
So I'm generally in favor of the idea of something like the climate notes. But I think that this memo, the way I see it, should really focus on things that are very near-term opportunities, and also things that are kind of a light lift for council, because I think if it's not those two things, it's not going to have an effect. I do, like I said, I like the carbon notes concept, and that's definitely something we want to work with city manager on soon as we have that formal transition. And I would rather, I guess, see the climate notes split off as an independent project, not just as a bullet point in the memo, because I don't think it's going to have the desired effect. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, so I don't want to belabor this one. I at least need a majority opinion here, even if we don't have consensus. So I want to see a show of hands. Should this carbon notes portion of the outline remain in this first memo or not? Well, let me put it positively. Raise your hand if you want to keep the carbon notes in the outline for this memo.
Can I add another little
Yeah, go ahead.
note, which is, I think there's a message that can be delivered here that's the same intent as the carbon notes, but not actually proposing a framework at this time. You know, saying we want to reiterate this is important. It's in the Seep. We're supposed to be considering this for major planning and expenditures. So let's not forget that. We're going to come back to you with some proposals. You know, that's not the same as proposing a framework, but I think if we're going to say this, we need to be able to show exactly what we're talking about, what we expect to see out of it. And we could, you know, we could leave it in the memo as just a, hey, Seattle's doing this thing and we think you should do it too, and leave it at that. But that's not a call to action for them.
I think what you're suggesting, Stu, is it becomes an informational item. Here's this thing, and we're not asking you to make a formal policy statement. Bob, I think you raised your hand.
I did. I guess I was kind of on the fence about keeping it in the memo or not, and I was thinking that maybe maybe we should have some text in the memo, and we can strike it in January when we review this. So we're actually we're voting on something that we can actually see what it is. I'm also not thinking that this memo is going to be the vehicle for asking them to approve any policy. This is only to alert them that we intend to bring these policies in order to implement the things that we're trying to do with the Seep. So it doesn't have to have it shouldn't include a lot of information, but it's got to be something that's sensible and understandable for them to see.
Adam?
Yeah, just to follow up with Bob's thing, I think that's accurate. You know, there is no structure for them to go through that, because really when we talk about this, if there is a desire to have it be structured very similar to this, it's a big deal. You know, it's a workload thing. As Stu said, we would have to have examples. We would probably have to have tiers of things. We need to know what our mandates are from the staff side, and that is a staff resource. And as probably has been said, actually, you know, Bob being a newly minted budget committee member, it's going to be a rough budget. We're not in a good shape. So, you know, things that add workload are going to be rough, and we're going to have to vet them. And staff, you know, back to that thing at the beginning about staff resources, this ask, you know, does trigger significant staff involvement and discussion with council about how they see it working and integrating. And the big stuff, like I said, I'm all for it. And I think I would love to have you mention it is fine, and mention that what we've done is a good start in connecting the dots. And now we're looking at turning the dial on analysis, and data that goes, that really connects things and helps with decision-making, processes, both for staff and for council, because there's many things that are critically important, I think, on the carbon counts. Maybe if you add them up in aggregate, there are more carbon decisions made outside of council than with council, honestly. So I think there's a lot of talk that needs to be had with this one, but I like the concept, and I want us to keep, inserting our constant pressure to do more, on this analysis side.
Okay, so now what I'm hearing, and I want to see if there's consensus, raise your hand if the concept as an informational item ought to be in this memo.
I think, Rick, with some context around it.
Yeah, it'll have to be limited because this can't be too long, but yes, I agree.
I think we're reiterating that we want new hiring to,
Yeah,
Precisely
cetera.
right.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to keep moving on here. I'd like to go back to the staff training section. There's a lot of background there. And do we want to say anything in this memo about staff training? Bob?
Well, I'm not really in favor of involving the council in staff training minutia, and just the fact that there is this back and forth suggests that it's a lot more complicated than just a general, statement that training is good, and we want people to be trained. Again, this strikes me as much more of something that can be decided by the city manager and by the department heads. And I don't see the council really, directing staff to do this sort of training in this current budget environment. That would actually actually allocate budget. They might direct it, but not allocate budget to it. So it just seems to me not a priority for this kind of memo.
Okay.
I think
Ray?
so this is already in the Seep, right? So would the purpose of bringing this up is to remind people it's in the Seep, or we don't think the city's following the Seep? What would be the point of putting this in here?
Thanks.
Well,
Because I understand the previous one in terms of hiring new people, we want them to have the expertise to understand climate more, right? And I think that's already happening when we send out, when we're asking people to apply for the job. So why would we put this in this memo? I'm
Okay,
not quite
so-
sure.
We're rapidly running through our time. I'm not hearing strong support for this. I'm
Okay.
personally would like to leave it out. So
All right.
I want to see somebody raise their hand if they believe staff training needs to stay in this document. Not seeing anybody, so let's move on.
Rick, I've got to bounce out, so I'll turn it over to Stu to finish this out. The staff training piece, I would like to talk to you all about later when there's maybe an informal time. I think there's still good stuff to be had there, but I do like not having it in there.
Okay.
But I would like to talk more with the commission about it.
Thanks, Adam. I
Okay.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you. See you guys.
Bye, Adam.
Okay, so Gary, you started talking about the prioritize Seep and climate knowledge and hiring management positions. Is this one in or out? So I guess my default is to leave all this stuff out. So what I want to start with is anybody going to strongly support keeping this in the memo? Raise your hand if you strongly support. I'm seeing no hands.
I would,
Go ahead.
I know, Rick, you're trying to move on, but I will just say that I think we can provide a link between the hiring decisions and our earlier discussion about the carbon notes, just phrasing that so that it basically carries over from one topic to another.
Okay. Whoever fleshes this out, I think could deal with Gary's comment. Is everybody okay with that? Yes? No?
Okay.
Okay. The pool?
That sounded like an action item.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, and we're going to come back to who's going to flesh this out, and then they'll deal with this appropriately.
Okay.
The pool, I would like to drop
got it.
off a long road ahead of us to deal with that.
I agree. I don't think it's
Somebody
ready.
interrupts and says, we have to put something in here right now. I want to just move on with and skip this one. Okay. Identify city-owned property solar sites. Bob?
It's already been done. I don't know. I think Tanya, when she mentioned it in the meeting last time, may have been, confused or something, because there already is a report that Larry Giardina did about all the city-owned solar sites, and pretty exhaustive. Maybe there's some new sites that could be added to it, but it doesn't seem to be that much of a priority for policy at this point.
Okay, so unless somebody strongly supports keeping it in by raising their hand, I propose we leave this out. Seeing no hands. The comp plat update, I believe we've belabored that already. So there's no point in putting it in the memo at this time, beyond our previous discussion. The PV and solar reserve, I believe there's been no forward progress on this, and so it's not right. And so unless somebody stops me, we're just going to move on. Budget recommendations. I think it is important for us to identify budget, but we need to be specific. The one that has been talked about for years now is the Seep outreach and engagement. But I don't think we can do anything about it unless, Stu, you come forward with a plan and dollars. So if you're willing to do that, then I think it makes sense to keep it in. Otherwise, we'll have to go away because we're not being specific.
Yeah, I mean, everything on this budget list, I would like to have a much longer conversation about than we have time for today. And I think that there's a number of things that are not on here that are going to be part of the breadth of the work of this policy commission. And we want to make sure that, most important for me is the big ticket items that we're working on right now. They're going to come to fruition when this next budget cycle is approved. We need to make sure there's dollars for those. So I really don't think we have time to get into the details of it right now, but I think there's a lot that's not on this list that probably could be on this list if we're going to make a list at all.
Well,
that's not very helpful. I'm sorry.
What about the ones that are on this list? Should we just vote whether these should be included versus adding new?
I haven't really had time to have a conversation with anybody about the design or the scope of any of these. And I think that there's a lot of structural issues that need to be agreed upon before we can say, here's the program and here's the amount of resources that we want to ask for that program. It's going to be a much longer conversation. And I think if we put forward anything and by way of like line items, that we're going to want it to be comprehensive, because otherwise, let's say best case scenario, they give us everything on our list. There's going to be another list later that's longer. So I'm not sure what to say about this, except I don't think it's very comprehensive right now.
Bob?
So, it's hard. I agree with Stu that it's hard to vote on any one of these, which all seem like great ideas, without knowing the full array. And I can think of quite a few other things that we should probably put a budget line in at the appropriate time. It strikes me that for this particular purpose, for this memo, because we're not going to be able to flesh it out in the kind of detail that would be necessary in order to justify a specific line, that if we can agree on some principles, these are the kinds of, we would like to put forth some principles by which we hope to the council would allocate resources to support the Seep implementation. And I think that principles could be leverage and impact. So using budget that would have high leverage and impact on greenhouse gas reduction or increased resiliency. And the second one thing would be helping the city lead the way, so that the city is out in front of what the city is asking the community to do itself. And then, not going into a lot of detail about what those things, there's a whole bunch of things that would fit under that. I think we should be evaluating. I think we would recommend that they evaluate any budget requests on the basis of the leverage and impact, and putting the city out in front, showing the way. So that would be my suggestion for this section.
Okay, we are rapidly running out of time. So I'd like to propose that somebody, the direction we're headed here is to make generic statements. That's true for the whole memo. And I think Bob is just outlining what that might mean within the budget section. And I don't think that we have time to brainstorm the kind of thing that Bob's talking about. And instead, we need to get people to volunteer to actually put meat on the bones before our next meeting. There's essentially two sections that are left. There's the municipal facilities plan, and I think that Bob was somewhat responsible for that. And so I don't think we need to belabor that, but then all the rest of it came from Gary. So I'd like for Gary to have a chance to talk about how he thinks the budget recommendations portion of this outline should go forward.
Well, I think Stu has offered the most insight, other than Bob's kind of overall policy approach. And if Stu could, I would love to see for our next meeting an outline of what you see as appropriate task and budget amounts that the CPC might be advancing to the council. I think you've got, at least to my perspective, the best understanding of where we're at and where we can go and what it might take to get there. Certainly the items that I put forward are just ideas. They aren't well fleshed out. They, I know, would be useful, but at the same time, it seems like we need the context of Stu's insights to figure out where they fit or if they fit at all.
Yeah, I can work on that. I'm going to need somebody from this group to help me probably, but I'm happy to take a stab at that. I think one thing that I would like to know with more clarity is what the prioritization of the different projects is, because if we are only partially funded, which is guaranteed, I want to make sure that that goes to whatever we think is most critical, which may or may not be the most expensive thing. So I want to make sure that whatever we think is most important gets the best scoping and the most attention. And hopefully we can articulate that in terms of like, these are our priorities. And that, that's adding another layer of complexity, yes, but I think it's important to do because we're not going to get all the resources we want. I think I've said in the past that we were lucky, my department was lucky last time, and that we didn't get cut, and most other places did. I don't even know if I can expect that amount of luck this time around. And really, the only thing I have going for my programs is the fact that we've secured the clean fuels funding, which isn't going to cover everything, no way. So I think it's a bigger conversation. So I'd also want to know, like, what are we hoping to convey in the space of this short memo? Is it actually a budget planning document, or are we just trying to highlight some areas that we think need attention and maybe attach a dollar amount to that somehow? So yeah, I can take a stab. I'm gonna need some help from someone. But.
Okay, so I think we've come up with a fair consensus for what to do with this memo. And now I'd like to come back to Jeff, who was raising the point much earlier about who's going to actually start doing the wordsmithing. So Jeff, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, other than I can take on the section up front about electric utility and even, talk to somebody about the built environment. But I can throw something together and other people can edit and add.
Well, I can serve as an editor. If somebody else wants to volunteer to step forward to play that role. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody leap forward, so I'll do that. What I've heard so far is that Jeff is going to work on the front end of this thing, and Stu, you were going to pull something together for the budget section, and Bob.
Yeah, I was going to volunteer. Stu said he would like somebody from the commission to work with him on the budget. I'm happy to do that if you all would like that.
Okay, that sounds like a plan to me.
And then I had Gary for the carbon notes draft.
Right.
section.
Right.
I'll do that.
Rick, so again, I thought the purpose of putting some line items out there with dollars was to try to get ahead of any budget decisions, to know that we're asking for some money. So I guess the question is, how detailed does that need to be? I think it's good to just to get something out there, at least so that they know we're going to be asking for money this year. And as far as a priority, I think once we have the list, we could establish that in our next meeting.
Right. So whether we're going to be able to transmit specific requests for money to council for this budget year, I think is unknowable right now. We need to do the work that has already been outlined tonight, and then in January, we'll come back to it. Okay, I'm only here seeing, what's up for Gary?
Oh, I just had one question. Stu, when is your budget due and how does it relate to the CPC's asks?
Well, I have very little involvement with the Conservation Division budget. That all goes through Adam, and it's not carved out into specific projects. So, as for, we have in Ashland what's like kind of a distributed funding model, which is that every department's going to do its fair share as it sees fit. So there's not a fund to speak of that's going to pay for anything. If there's anything we want to fund that's not currently accounted for, we need to make an argument and a policy justification for that, and preferably an argument for why council should even spend energy thinking about it, which I think we can do for all of these projects. But I think we shouldn't assume that we just ask and it's given. We're gonna have to fight for every dollar.
And when do we need to articulate that as contrast to doing January?
As soon as possible. I don't think there's a hard deadline. I mean, once the budget committees start meeting, I think they start making decisions. But like we mentioned earlier, the CIP is already being partially laid out. It's sort of a, I don't know, there's not that much room in the budget to create new every budget cycle. It's a lot of keeping things going, trimming programs. So, I don't know what the hard deadline is the short answer to your question.
Okay.
Yeah, so my experience with the school system, and it's under the same budget laws, a municipal corporation like the city in Oregon. The reality is that sometime between January and February, most of the budget is going to be set. And there'll be some discussion between council and management about that. But then when the budget committee comes along, basically all they can do is cut. And effectively speaking, trying to add something later on, like in March or beyond that, it just doesn't happen. So I think that's sort of the cycle we should be thinking about. Somebody who has more direct experience with the city rather than the school system might have better information, but that's my take on it.
I mean, I haven't gone through a cycle, but my understanding is that the staff are working, now they've been putting together their budgets, and it's going to be the staff's budget that'll go to, that'll be finished, I guess, put completely together by February. and then go to the budget committee, and this council is part of the budget committee in March, and there'll be some discussions about that, about the different line items, and it could go up, could go down, but you're right. I think it generally is going to go down, not up, because the task is to balance the budget, is to make sure that that it comes out in balance, and then the budget committee recommends to the council, and the council decides at the end of June. So
Right.
this is a memo for council. This is not a memo for the staff. So the council won't start to see anything with the budget until
Yeah,
March.
so my take on this situation is that we're really just priming the council for the 2022 budget. That the likelihood of getting anything in 2021 is extraordinarily small because of the situation and the timing and our lack of preparedness.
It's a biannual budget. So there is a budget that will be approved by the council by the end of June 2021, and it will cover 2 years, 2021 through 2023, mid 2023.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm glad you pointed that out to everybody. But I believe it's also the case that there's annual tweaks. Anyway, those details don't really matter right now. I think the bulk of what I said is roughly true.
I have one last question. Stu, if we did make a budget request, would that fall into the administrator budget then as a commission?
It depends on what the program is. If it's for this commission, then yeah, it'd be through admin. If it's for something else, it might be public works or somewhere else.
So Rick, maybe you could ask Adam when he needs stuff from us and what detail and all of that, and we'll just deal with whatever he says.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessary to apprise the council that we're going to need money for anything.
Right. I think we're just belaboring this now. I think the work plan going forward is pretty well identified, and we need to get on with it. Stu?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention is that if we're going to identify anything about funding in this memo, I think it's important to point out that electrification is actually has a good ROI for this community. Not only can it help our climate issues, but also it helps our general fund and it helps our utility grow and so on and so forth. So if we're going to say anything, it would be perhaps, at least be prepared for investments in electrification because these benefit us in a variety of ways, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah,
if you
I appreciate
need
the
to
general point, but I'm a little hesitant to talk about investments prior. I think we're prejudging what the plan is.
yeah, that's fine.
There are plenty of ways of funding things that don't require the city to put the cash up front. So I don't even want to go down that path right now until we really know what we're talking about.
And that's probably a better pathway if we have the option.
Right. Okay, so I think that we are now done with 5.8. We have not quite 40 minutes. So let's come back to 5.5, bike loan. There's only 5 minutes allocated for this because I think it's just a status update.
Nothing to add other than we're making progress. Any questions? Okay, done.
Good. Then let's move on to 5.6, lightweight vehicles. You'll notice I allocated 5 minutes for that because it felt like that was in more or less the same state. Things are
Exactly. I would like the CPC to include on their January agenda time to talk about the white paper or the benefits paper that the work group is working on, and then to schedule time in February to actually consider a recommendation of the council on that subject. Other than that, I don't have anything else. Any questions?
well, there was a email thread from the folks that you're working with about this that I replied to, and I didn't hear anything back. And I think it might be worthwhile to try to address things that at least I don't understand ahead of sinking a lot of effort into writing a very extensive document.
You don't need to worry about it, Rick. It's done, and it does. That document addresses your concerns.
Okay, great. So I look forward to seeing it as soon as possible then.
You'll get it and it is about 50 pages. We may want to send it out in advance of the packet.
Is there any process problem with that, Stu or Elizabeth?
No, I don't think so. But I guess Gary and I, we should probably connect and just catch up about it. I am not totally sure that the bike piece of it needs to go to council. So let's discuss, I guess.
Oh, we were talking about the reducing maximum speeds, not about the bike lane. Yeah.
Sorry, you skipped one ahead. I didn't catch it. Yeah, that makes sense to me. That one would definitely need to go to council. Yeah.
Okay.
So hold on, Rick. So what's the action item here? Gary's going to flush out the document.
And send it out in advance of the packet going out for the next meeting. So presumably that means
January.
a week or two.
And that's about reducing speed.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to, maybe Gary, we can talk about this when we discuss, but I want to make sure that Transportation Commission really gets to take the lead on this, because it seems like that's where it came from and it's more directly their purview. We can certainly support, and I encourage that, but I just want to make sure that the rules are clear there. And
that's also my expectation.
okay. So maybe it's them that's sending it to council then.
Precisely.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now let's go to 5.7. I want to point out that we only have 15 minutes for this now because I want to get through sections 6 and 7 of the agenda. So Gary, I think you're on for that one.
Yeah. So we're just to the point that this strategy document needs to be more widely circulated, and I would like the CPC's endorsement of involving other agencies or departments in this discussion. So that's all the more there is to it. We're basically testing the water to see how receptive other agencies are and the Parks Department is to moving forward with this concept. We'll find out. If they aren't receptive, then we may not have a program, or we'll have to recast it.
Right.
Yeah, Gary, so I think one of our action items you were going to get with Parks and decide how to move forward on this is this document how you did that, or did you actually talk to them, or I guess I don't understand. You're waiting to hear, and they may not be on board at all. So I'm just trying to understand where that is.
I asked on the last agenda, I had suggested that I would move forward with talking to the Parks Department, and that didn't get a favorable response. One, I was talking about an ordinance, which was the wrong characterization. And Bob pointed out correctly that it's a strategy that we're advancing. And Stu expressed the concern that we shouldn't be talking to the Parks Commission, but instead talking to Parks staff. So I'm basically coming back and asking the same question as I asked last meeting, which didn't get acted upon, and broadening the scope to include not only the Parks Department, but also SOU and the Ashland School District. And involving, I guess, the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission in discussions related to this topic.
So your item 1 is initiate coordination and collaboration with the groups you just discussed.
Exactly right. But I want the Climate Policy Committee to endorse that step. Because if we move forward, we all have to be on the same page, right?
Yes. Did you want to have a motion about that, or are we looking for consensus, or what?
however you feel it needs to be done, Rick. It's up to you.
If we're in consensus about Gary moving forward with that, I don't believe that we need a formal motion. So if everybody, no, go ahead, Bob.
So I heard Gary say that he was correcting it to be, instead of the commission, the Parks Commission, the Parks staff. The document says commission rather than staff. What is the best? I mean, I don't have a view on which is the better one. I just want to know which one it is.
It is the commission, because we are a commission. In my estimation, we should be communicating with the commissions. It's their responsibility to direct or ask the staff to do something in response. But from the standpoint of commission to commission communication, that's the way it's supposed to work in my estimation. So my outreach will be to the commission members, not to the staff.
But they could decide that staff ought to talk to you?
Precisely. It's their call. It's not mine.
Right.
Question, the Climate Outreach Commission, who would be approaching the university and the school district and so on?
That would be me.
Okay.
Well, so one thing, university is represented on the Climate Conservation Outreach Commission already. There's supposed to be a representative from the school district there as well, but there's not currently. So by just involving the CCOC, you're getting nearly all of that. Now, it may not be the exact right person in the organization you want to talk to, but the link is already there. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
I like the approach.
Yeah, I
Thank
think getting feedback from those groups on moving forward with this would help, so that we're not just asking the city.
I agree with that too. If you are okay with Gary reaching out according to this document, and as we discussed, thumbs up.
Thank you.
You know, as we move forward with this, I think it's fine for this commission to talk to APRC. But I will also let staff know that that's going to happen, just so that they see it coming. Because what doesn't help me is when they get outside pressure from a roundabout way without a heads up. So just so you all know, when we start to communicate with the commission, I will also give the staff at Parks and SAU a heads up. School district, if I can reach them.
Right.
Just a comment, I was looking for a battery-powered leaf blower myself, and I wasn't into the professional models, but I did peruse them, and in order to get sufficient power compared to the gas-powered ones, I observed that you needed a backpack of batteries to accomplish that. So
It is just like everything else. To reduce our carbon footprint, it takes either more time or more money.
Mhm. So I guess we'll see what the, I know you have a timeline there that you're proposing, and we'll see what their reaction is to that as well.
Right. And it starts in January. I'm not going to do anything this month on this topic.
No, I was thinking more of their
Right.
start plus
Yep.
1 year, start plus 2
Right.
years. Okay.
Right.
Okay, did you want to have a similar confirmation of your point 2, Gary?
2, I'm sorry.
The spring 2021, begin initial work to expand the emissions reduction to include the community consistent and so on? Or were you thinking that we were discussing both of those together?
I think at this juncture, doing the outreach to the commissions is fine. It's going to be a feedback loop from that point forth anyway. We don't really know where we're going to go, and we're just testing the waters.
Okay, so do you think you've gotten what you wanted tonight?
I'm fine.
Okay, good.
And thanks for working on that, Gary.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, so now we're on to new business. There was an opportunity to appoint a member from this commission to the Housing Capacity Analysis Working Group. I'm not sure what formally they are. And there was not time to bring it to the commission before the meeting started. And so the chair took it upon himself to contact a couple of commissioners. And in the end, Commissioner Brown was appointed. And I would like you all to confirm that you know that's happening and that you're okay with it.
You're good.
Okay.
No objection.
No objection. Very good. Pool plans. So I believe at least one, probably more of you folks found about the pool. If you can give us a 5-minute or so summary of what they said and what their plans are, that would be great. Who wants to raise their hand? Bob.
Well, I listened in to the presentation. I didn't listen to the Q&A. And the presentation basically shows that least cost is gas, not surprisingly. And they only looked at, in the electrification options, they only looked at air heat pump. They didn't look at ground coupled heat pump or other options. I understand there's also a possibility of water to water loop, heat pump, and they didn't analyze those. I don't know whether those came up in the Q&A. And like you said, I think, Rick, at the outset, they definitely talked about coming to this commission with a presentation at some point. I would hope they'd actually add some other options rather than just the, rather large construction and investment of air heat pump, air exchange heat pump.
And so there was no talk about solar panels?
No, not in the main presentation, but in the Q&A maybe.
Yeah, there was, because they showed an example. One of the pictures was a previous pool they worked on. And the concern there, well, there was two aspects of solar. One, using solar to heat the water directly, and discussion about the roof area you need for that. And then there was solar PV and the amount of area you need for that. So they hadn't explored that in depth to define what the cost would be, but I think that's going to be a follow-on for them. The other thing is that the pool is basically 2x the volume of water that we currently have. And the estimate is you need 3 million BTUs an hour to heat it.
In the dead of winter.
Yeah, in the dead of winter. And basically they want to keep it going year round, especially in the winter, because they have contracts with other school systems to use it during that period for their swim teams.
Bob, you mentioned that gas was the cheapest. Are you just talking capital costs, or are we talking life cycle?
Both. The analysis that they presented showed substantial savings of gas, both in construction and then in operation. Yeah,
they had like 80,000 a year for gas versus 275 for pure electric. And then they have the electric heat pump, which would be cheaper, but then it had a high capital costs. And so they were measuring the payback on the all electric version versus gas, because there really is no competition from a cost standpoint with pure gas.
Well, those sorts of analyses are so subject to the conditions that you're set when you do them. I want to see all the icky details before I believe any of that.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's fair to say that the gas, cost analysis probably doesn't include a lot of externalities.
Yeah, the social cost of carbon is probably.
Oh yeah, no, they're not. But the designer was very aware of being in Ashland and the need for reducing greenhouse gases. So he admits that there's more work to do and that's a concern for the city. So give me the money and I'll do it.
And
well, and
Michael,
there's also a stranded asset issue. They could buy this thing and in a few years, the cost of running it could just go through the roof. And Bob?
Yeah, and Michael Black mentioned at the outset that there's gone through several steps of comment and analysis on this, that they had not yet received the document. They were going to be receiving the actual the document at the meeting or as their meeting was being presented. So all we saw was a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. We didn't actually see the document, but the document is, he said it's going to be on their website. So we could probably find it on the website already. Maybe Ray has already seen it.
No, I haven't seen it, but he also, the meeting did not discuss anything to do with funding. All he gave was estimates.
Okay. Does this commission need to formally reach out to them, or is it clear that they're going to come to us and we don't need to do anything?
I think I'd like to know approximately when they plan on meeting with us, because I think there was some additional public input meetings scheduled as well. So I'd kind of like to see what their schedule is for this.
Is there a meeting that you would like to invite them to?
No, they said they were going to meet with us. So Michael Black's got a plan of all these series of meetings he's going to have. So I'd like to see the dates for those.
Well, so I don't know if it's Stu, Ray, Bob, somebody, we clearly want to be proactive about this. And if they're not going to come back to us within the week, I think we ought to reach out to them. And if somebody can volunteer to do that.
I'll send Michael Black an email and ask him when they want to be on our look ahead for.
Okay.
Just one last point. One last point. I don't know whether Julian is a commissioner, of course, on the Parks Commission. I don't know whether he actually was able to attend the meeting, but he'll also be a logical point of contact on this because he serves on both commissions.
Yeah, he was there.
Gary?
So Stu, would you also ask Michael when it would be most timely to get comments from the CPC?
I can't hear you, Stu.
Yeah, I can ask him that.
That'd be great.
Okay, I think we're done with the pool. The next thing is student voting rules. I put together all the commentary that had been sent to me and just forwarded it on to you folks. My personal opinion is that this is not an opportune time for us to put our effort into revising the charter of this commission. Anybody else have anything to say? Okay.
I mean, I think that's appalling, but I think you're absolutely that. I mean, there's no way to make a practical argument to the contrary. It's too bad that that's the way it was set up. But you know, I don't see that we should be taking this on at this point. So I agree with you.
Okay, so hopefully the future will calm down to the point where we can address things that seem wrong like this, but that time isn't now. Okay, good. Then what I would like to do is to go on to the look ahead, which is called topic tracking and potential meeting schedule. I obviously don't propose we go through every single one of these things. What I would like is to task all of you to go through them all on your own time and get back to me on any update to the status and your best guess for when you would like meeting time for that topic. And I also want to, I took liberties when I put this together, things that were, as far as I know, not ever discussed at the commission level. I stuck on there because I felt they were very important. And the one that I particularly want to point to is the natural gas appliance phase out. I sent an email about this outlining why I thought this is extremely important to do. And currently I've tasked myself with this thing. I'm not sure I'm really the best person to be doing that, but I will carry forward. Writing a page is not a huge commitment. But I would like to discuss that particular one since we actually have some time. Gary?
Bob, am I correct in recalling that you were going to take the phase out of gas water heaters as a part of the built environment work task list? And would you be willing to take that back on and advance it as a lead person?
I thought that was Julian that was doing that, but in any case, I see this as I think there's two tracks on this. One is the city actually deciding as in an ordinance to phase out. The other one is putting in place resources for allowing people to do it and encouraging people to do it. They're related, and one is more effective if supported. Each of them are more effective if supported by the other. And I wouldn't see it as just hot water heaters. I would think it should be, as a package. But that's just my take.
Yeah,
on
and
it.
that's the way I've outlined it. Is it's all appliances and equipment that use natural gas. So Stu, I think you were wanting to comment.
Oh, I see this integrating pretty deeply with the kind of energy retrofit work that Bob and I are going to be working on. And there is a question of how do we support our citizens to choose their energy sources differently and reduce emissions doing that. And there's also a question of what sort of, city level policy decisions are we going to make, or is there even an option to do an ordinance? And I think I guess like Bob said, they're kind of two different tracks, and I see a lot of potential to work on the first track. I strongly advise against pursuing any ordinances at this point, but that's up to you folks.
Well, my concept was that the ordinance would come much later, like in years. And if we were really lucky, it would never be necessary because everybody would see the wisdom and do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, reaching out to the people who make the purchasing decisions and the people who advise the people who are making the purchasing decisions is the first order of business. And the thing that I most would like to see is for furnaces in particular, and let's remember, every time somebody installs a furnace, it's going to be there for decades. And that's why I'm harping on that tonight. And burning a lot of natural gas. This is not a small deal. And so one concept is trying to intervene at the decision point, which is when the previous gas furnace stops working. That is when people actually make the decision, but they're generally under stress because it's probably during the winter. And so finding some way to de-stress that situation so that people can think about how they, instead of just going and grabbing another gas furnace off the shelf and sticking it in because that gives them heat tomorrow, how we can cause fuel switching to occur in a timely fashion that doesn't mean there's an investment in another decades-long lasting appliance. So,
the thing, Rick, that comes most to mind is maybe the wood stove code changes that we've made over the years, which are not my field of expertise by any means, but that, definitely instituted a change, like no new wood stoves, right? So, and
No
setting
new
some standards around that.
yeah, Bob?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, as you described it, Rick, I think it makes total sense. I'm totally with you on it. And I think it does make sense to develop this, to add this as a separate task, and let's get started laying it out and laying out a time frame. And, it is, it's got to be meshed in with the retrofit program as well. So it doesn't have to come at the same time. So I think, yes, I would support you. If you were making a motion to add this to our task list, I think it's an absolute thing to add to our task list in the way that you described it.
That sounds great. Gary, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, actually, as you described it, Rick, I think that this task is more properly in the scope of the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission as contrasted to our role. I see us as doing much less of that and more on the policy end of what will it take for the city to help customers change more directly. And that one of the few tools that the city has to change behavior is through ordinances. But to the degree that you want to outreach and do education, that seems more appropriately the realm of the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission rather than our commission.
I agree. And actually, I'm going to be chatting with one of those commissioners informally tomorrow. And I'm planning to raise this topic. I believe there are other levers besides ordinance. There are permits, and those can at least be used to gather data, if not to enforce anything. Anyway, I don't, as long as you all are okay with adding this to the task list and saying that this is something that ought to be going forward fairly soon, that's all I was really looking for tonight. Ray?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned alternative to ordinance as the incentives. So I know that Vista has incentives for gas assisted heat pumps. The electrical would have to come from Ashland. Do you know if we already have that, Stu, or would we need to develop that?
Sorry, can you ask that question again?
Does Ashland already have an incentive to buy an all electric heat pump?
Yes. We have some old ones and some newer ones that are coming online also.
Because
But I think
I'm assuming we don't offer one for gas. That's through a Vista.
Well, we haven't, but we're starting to.
Okay.
wait. So let's make sure that we're talking about the same thing. I think, Ray, you're asking about gas to gas, more efficient gas, or
No,
gas to
I'm
electric?
talking about gas assisted heat pumps versus all electric heat
Yeah,
pumps.
dual fuel.
Right.
Yeah. So any gas incentives that are existing right now for gas efficiency are going to come through Energy Trust.
Gary?
The one incentive that the city's kicking off in January is for any kind of hot water heater to be converted to a electric heat pump water heaters. So that will allow for fuel switching as of January 1.
Yes.
But we don't have a heat pump, all electric heat pump incentive.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what happens in January, independent of the current fuel source.
I didn't mean for a hot water heater. I meant for heating
Oh,
the home.
no.
And we have
Well-
to, it's complicated. And part of the reason it's complicated is because it depends on the funding source. So if you have an electric whole house heat pump, I'm pretty sure there's an incentive to get a better electric whole house heat pump. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
But if you've got a gas furnace, is there an incentive for switching to a electric heat pump?
We're trying to make that.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
So that
But
would
This
follow
would be in
in
support
line
of,
with this.
I
Yeah.
have a general comment about fuel switching, which is that we should not call it that. It's emissions reduction by electrification. So if we can all keep that in mind. Very
Strike
helpful.
my comment. Elizabeth, please strike my comment using those terms.
Jeff?
I just had a quick question. Can we raise the price of gas through taxation or some sort of fees that are imposed?
As part of the energy utilities plan that has now been narrowed from a staff perspective to an electric utility plan, I think that discussion, that group of people needs to continue that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, the short thing is that Avista is governed by the PUC and they set all the rates.
And there's more to that, but I don't want to prolong the discussion tonight.
Oh.
Okay, so the last thing was topic prioritization. I'm assuming we're done with this, unless somebody wants to right now talk about some specific status or meeting date or adding to the list or something like that, then I'm done with the look ahead for now. Does anybody want to add anything? Okay. A month ago, I was talking about prioritizing things, and I think we've made good progress on talking about the bandwidth of this commission and the staff bandwidth to deal with things. What we have not yet talked about, as far as I can remember, is council bandwidth. I think we're all relatively aware that there's very limited council bandwidth. But the other thing is citizen bandwidth. My belief is that we can only take a very small, maybe one major thing to the citizens where we're asking for significant behavior change, either in what they do in their day-to-day activities, or in what they're paying for, or in how they think about how they make decisions, for example, putting in a heat pump instead of gas furnace. And I haven't heard any of the rest of you speak to that limitation, and I'd like, with the 5 minutes that are left, to see if there's any comment any of you have.
Well, just looking at some of the local social media, it's pretty obvious that certain topics get a lot of attention. So the pool, for example, boy, people get very worked up on spending money on things that that they don't think they're going to use or something. So I think we need to be mindful as we push some of these things through, what hot buttons and potential resistance, and how to address that.
Bob?
Yeah, I think that's right. I agree with Jeff that there's certainly is. I'm not on social media anymore. Fortunately, now that the election is over, I don't have to do that. So I pay no attention. But I think that is true, that there are certainly some hot button issues, road diet, all these kinds of things that people start getting really exercised about. What's difficult for me to gauge, and because I'm a newcomer here as well, is how widespread that is, or whether that's a small percentage of people that are extremely vocal on that social media streams. There was a few people who were talking a lot and very loudly. I think there is also a group, and this comes out of the work from SOCAN, in the survey that they presented to us, that I think there's a group of people who are also do want to do more. So there's an advocate, there's a constituency for doing more, and maybe more than just one thing. I think there's obviously some sort of a distribution. I don't know what the shape of that. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what the shape of the distribution is. I don't know what the levels of the distribution are of people's willingness to take on more than one task at once. But I think we can go pretty far. I think that's a task in front of us. Figure out, what that looks like and how much of a constituency is there for really digging in and implementing the Seep, which was approved 3 years ago.
Gary?
Oh, I was just going to say that really in terms of, the public's willingness to accept or to consider changes that we might advance, I really see that as the role and responsibility of the city council to gauge that and to provide direction to us in terms of what they're willing to actually put forward and entertain. It's our job to make sure we're advancing the best policy that we can that achieves the most impact at a particular point in time.
Okay. Food for thought. I don't think that I have anything else to bring up. So we're just about at our timeout anyway.
Rick, I have a question.
Go ahead.
You mentioned you're going to get with Outreach Commission.
Yes.
So is,
Well, what I want to be clear, I am informally meeting with one member of the commission.
okay,
This is not an action item. That was purely informational. I'm doing this because I want to chat with them.
okay. Because we can see as we want to implement our goals for next year and the projects we have that we're going to need to be integrated with them in terms of rolling some things out related to education and et cetera, as we've discussed earlier. So I expect us, hopefully, if we can get over this COVID thing too, we'll be able to work together more.
Right, and so that actually might be something that I want to put on this task list is coordination with CCOC, because that you're right, that is important. I hadn't done that up to now, I think primarily because we're still getting to the point where we have a fully formed thing that we want to roll out. I don't think we want to try to roll out a half-baked thing.
Mhm.
Gary?
I would just suggest that we expand that notion of outreach and coordination, not just to the Conservation and Climate Commission, but also to all the other commissions that we have topical relationships with. For instance, the Transportation Commission would very much delight in hearing from us periodically, I'm sure.
Well, and I would encourage all the commissioners to reach out to the various community organizations so that we stay in touch with what's happening outside of our little sandbox. And with that, it is now past 6:30. So I would like to gavel it close. Thank you all. I think it's been another productive session, and we'll be chatting again.
Hey, thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.